Hello, everyone, and joining us today are two winners from the Broadcast Tech Innovation Awards, which took place only in November 2020, a few months ago. So we've got Dan Carew-Jones, who is post-production consultant at Arrow, and Morwen Williams, who is Director of UK Operations at BBC News. Welcome, and congratulations to you both.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we're really excited to find out more about your winning entries. And I wanted to start with you, Morwen. Let's start with the BBC and your winning award for Best Innovation in Lockdown for Virtual Production Tools. So your entry contained not one, not two, but three innovations, and it was basically innovation on steroids. So can you give us a summary of what those were? Just a quick summary of what those three innovations were.
Well, it's thanks to the really clever people that work in our team, they suddenly spotted what the gaps were and how we needed to resolve these. And that was, number one, we're doing a lot more on Zoom, and Zoom didn't work particularly well in a TV environment because of the frame rate, bit rate, and it just didn't look as good. So literally within a couple of weeks, my team invented something that they called Toucan. We give everything bird names in when we invent them in our team. So this one was Toucan, and it resolved those issues. And just basically at the touch of a button, that was a better product for our audiences, and it was a smoother workflow for our shoot edits, who were primarily being asked to use this, who were already facing new challenges out there. You know, they were the ones who were going out and meeting people on the street still and recording things in a safe COVID. We're on the front line of doing things. So anything we could do to make that better for them. So Toucan was one thing, and that has proved pretty successful and has been wider adopted. The other one was something called virtual audience. So if you remember back to those days in April time, and when you saw your first program, something like Have I Got News for You, that didn't have an audience, to be fair, it felt pretty flat. And our guys sitting at home thought that as well. And they thought, you know what, we need programs, and they invented a way of pulling Zoom again together. And in those first iterations, it was for audio programs. 200 people and recorded, because they were recorded programs, every single contributor on the Zoom, and edited out all the coughs and splutters and kettles and fire alarms or whatever might be going off in the background. And
amazing.
The team and took about 20, 30 each or something and edited it all. They learned after that to find newer ways of doing it. But the first few weeks, it was like that. And we've done so many of the audience. That was on the 1st of June, and it was the Infinite Monkey Cage. And we're now producing 3 to 5 programs a week. It's been terrific, and some of the panelists and the audience people like it. The panelists love it because they get a reaction, and it just sounds like a better product. So many of your Radio 4 programs, which aren't strictly news, but we saw a problem that the BBC had and we fixed it. And finally, one other called Pre-Rec, and where we bring discussion programs together. If you're doing that over something like this, then the audio isn't as good. So we did a low latency connection between the contributors, and then a simultaneous quality recording of each participant that you put together, and that mitigated all those problems about internet dropout that we're all familiar with, and I've had one or two since I've been on here probably, and that's been a game changer as well. We even used that in our on the road ways of working. So if you're producing a piece for the 6 o'clock news, if you've gone out and filmed it, you used to sit in a small vehicle and edit that together. You can't do that. So the producer the correspondent would go home, the cameraman would go home, and they would get a Zoom going, and then he or she would record their track in that low latency, but then recorded at source. And so they've all been game changers for us, and I'm hugely proud of the brilliant innovation in the team for bringing these things together. And Broadcast for recognising that.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kudos to you and your team. I mean, how big is your team? When you talk about your team and the fact that they, found solutions to all these problems they were coming across, how many people are we talking about that were involved?
Well, that was two of the teams, but they're not big teams. One's about 10, one's about 12. In that, my whole team's 700 because we do all the studios, all the field work, all the camera work. But these two teams, one of them is our connectivity and innovation department. So you would rather hope that they were looking at that. The other one was our program outside broadcast. Of course, on March the 23rd, all that stopped. So they turned their minds to doing other things. And they're the ones that invented the virtual audience and the pre-rec.
That's quite a lean team, isn't it? 10 to 12 people. I mean, how did they manage to kind of, I mean, is that just a normal regular day in the life of BBC, or what do they do differently to work at such speed and innovate at such speed?
Well, for a start, they're really bright, clever people, so that always helps. And they're good collaborators with each other within their teams. They just fire off each other and support each other. So it was actually within those teams, it was just 2 or 3 or 4 people within each of those teams. Toucan was, I think, 2 or 3 people, and the other 2 were probably 3 or 4 people working together. I mean, the whole team got involved in the end, and the whole team goes out to do those, when I say goes out, to do those virtual audience programs now. So it's teamwork, really. It is good teamwork.
Yeah. And it's so important. That word collaboration has become so important, particularly during the pandemic, people just collaborating, sharing ideas and being able to kind of, bounce off each other. You talked about, the 3 different initiatives and projects that the team worked on. Which one for you was the kind of are you most proud of, and why?
Oh, now that's like choosing between your children. That is just, I'm not going there.
Secretly,
all different aspects. They were all absolutely brilliant, and they've all solved completely different problems. So they are. I suspect, if you're putting me on the spot, and it's not my, don't put me on the spot to say it's my favourite. The one that will have most impact is virtual audience, because in the old days, you used to have to come to London or come to wherever the centre was to be part of the BBC audience. Now you can do that from anywhere. And that means we can reach more of our audiences and have a diverse, better selection of audience people. It can go to anybody. You are not limited by having to travel to a location. And that, I think, will stay with us. And different can be involved in our programs, so that's huge, really, and that's something we've been striving for, just to get to closer to our audiences. So that probably for that reason.
Yeah, and delighting your customers and making it more of an inclusive experience is always a positive thing. I'm not sure if you can hear us still, Morwen, but I'm going to ask one more question before we move on to Dan and his project. So, are there any examples of where these innovations really shone? Are there any specific shows that you think that they worked really well on? You mentioned News of the World.
I mean, the Infinite Monkey Cage, Mock the Week, QI have all used virtual audience. We even did Children in Need and did that in Vision as an Envision one. So I mean, the Toucan, you won't notice it, but it's there in the background in every Zoom report you ever see on the news. Probably most of them are done that way. So a lot of programs are using this, and we've got over 800 users, I think, on the pre-rec now throughout the BBC, all pulling together in departments outside news, all helping it. So lots of big programs.
Oh, brilliant. So the feedback you're getting must be really positive.
Yeah, from producers and people, as I say, panelists who are just so grateful to have some audience reaction. Do you try being on a comedy program and not hearing if anybody's laughing at your comment or jokes? So that's made all the difference. And as I say, it's not straight news, but we've been absolutely delighted to share our skills with other people.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you, Morwen. I'm going to talk to Dan now, and then we'll come back together for more of a joint discussion. Welcome, Dan.
Hi, thank you.
Hello. So your team won the award for best use of the cloud for creative innovation for Magic of Disney's Animal Kingdom. So can you give us a quick snapshot about what the project was about and the challenge that you faced?
Well, the project was behind the scenes at Disney's Animal Kingdom Park in Orlando, and we were faced with the task. Really, it started off as being a task of just moving a huge amount of data very quickly. We had 4 camera teams and various specialist rigs set up in the enclosures, and we were generating roughly 18 hours a day over 5 months of filming. So we ended up with, in total, about 200 terabytes of data, 2 terabytes a day. We didn't want to sort of be waiting in the edit week after week for hard drives to arrive by FedEx or some obviously any other courier possibilities. But we were looking at ways to get data using the internet, using the cloud, and obviously basic mathematics will tell you that the usual hotel Wi-Fi or even a very good internet connection on site wasn't going to give us enough capacity to be able to ship that amount of media back to the edits. And we eventually found a company that was able to offer us significant bandwidth to get into the cloud on a short-term basis. And once we got into the cloud, it sort of opened our eyes about what we could do before it actually arrived with us. And so we ended up using virtualized transcoding machines and virtualized storage to enable us for basically overnight from the US to get that day's footage prepared and ready for the edit the following day, and into our web MAM system. It's called Limecraft Flow, which is just a viewing and logging platform, again cloud-based. And all of that was able to happen basically overnight, so that when the edits came in the morning, they had the previous day's footage available, all 18 plus hours of it.
Wow. So you were basically taking data from the US, 200 terabytes of data, transferring it to London. Was it to London?
Yeah, came back to London. Yeah.
So that's immense. That the sheer volume of content being moved and dealt with in the cloud is vast. So what did you have to do to kind of plan and prep for that?
Well, we spent a lot of time. I mean, before it was even greenlit, and when it was as a concept, talking about how we were going to do it, because we knew that the schedule, well, not the schedules, but the editing process wasn't going to be able to wait for 2 weeks to have 3 weeks old footage delivered to it, because it just sort of broke the connection then between the edits and the production. So we started looking quite early about how we would do it, and we knew that effectively bandwidth was going to be the key, and it was the key. And we discovered I guess I should give them a name check, a company called The Matrix, who basically were able to unlock a very large connection for us on a sort of on-demand basis. And to be honest, we tried this before with other productions, and that availability of bandwidth was a real problem. And we had an experience probably 4 or 5 years ago of having a studio shoot in New York and an edit in London. And we were trying to get high bandwidth connections going on at that point. And it was, at that point, $30,000 a month, which was way out of our reach. This was significantly less than that, and was a manageable cost for us. And then, as I say, once you got into the cloud, then it opens up a whole other load of possibilities, and we were able to sort of look at it from an ideal perspective, if you like. So we'd sit down and say, well, what do you actually want when you come in the morning? Do you want the high res footage, or do you want the edit encoded footage, or do you want the web proxies, or do you want all three? And we were able then to sort of incorporate the sort of the DIT process, if you like, directly into the edit schedule. And so footage would come over and be available for viewing on our MAM platform onto Linecraft. It'll be available in the edit for the editors as avid files, and it just increased the availability and meant that there was a back and forth between the edit and the production, which sometimes you don't get sort of a long distance production like that. So that, you know, production would get, or the production on the ground would get feedback on footage the day after they've shot it, rather than 2 weeks later, when it's sort of a distant memory at the time.
So you mentioned that you're able to incorporate the DIT process into this, and how far along the project were you before you realised actually we can do that, and then you were able to do that?
It was part of the workflow. It was part of the workflow planning. Really, we had to get everyone needed to buy into it, and include, you know, from editorial to DIT to directors, producers, execs. The ultimate aim of everybody was to get the footage back to the edit as soon as we could, and everyone realistically did buy into that. And it was a really useful process that went on probably for 2 or 3 months, on and off, of developing this sort of workflow stroke data flow, because each time you'd identify where a bottleneck was, whether it be bandwidth, whether it be just volume of data, or whether it's, you know, the workload of any particular part of the process. They'd be identified because everyone was inputting into the overall workflow design, if you like.
So if you were to do, you know, if you were to go through this whole process again, which I imagine you will do on another project, is there anything that you would do differently next time? I
think what we do differently is probably just take more advantage of the virtualization issue. We have an in-house post-production department who have played a significant role in making this work. You know, Kieran Spears and his team do a brilliant job of sort of corralling all the information that was coming through. But it's a limited resource in terms of the actual physical machines that you've got to throw at a problem. And I think we would use more of those virtualization services, because, like I say, the key thing is the bandwidth to get this footage up there, and then you can do all sorts of things with it. You can, you know, on the more sort of esoteric side, you could apply the AI technologies to help you find stuff and to log stuff and create stuff. But we've got the projects coming up that are thinking of using that. And doing it again would, because we're going in with a bit more preparation now and a bit more knowledge and understanding, then those virtualized services offer us great opportunities, I think, when it comes to it.
I mean, it sounds like it's probably quite a huge investment. Do you feel like you've got the return on investment for what was delivered?
Definitely, because I mean, to be honest, it wasn't. It was a significant cost, but when you write that up against the you know, even shipping costs, ingesting costs, delay of edit costs, then it's really, I try to think one of the learnings really that we came out of it was to look at the value of a proposition rather than the cost of a proposition, and when you balance it up, you can see that the value that this offered was justified the cost of it ultimately.
You just asked the question I was going to ask. What was the biggest learning? So I'll preempted it. So I'll move on to I'll ask Morwen the same question. What was your biggest learning, Morwen, from this you know, this intense period of pandemic innovation, lockdown innovation?
You know, it was just working out where our gaps were, and making sure we'd got those gaps covered, and you know, be they aspirational ones or sort of deficiency ones. And I think, you know, some of the biggest actual challenges were those tricky bits of you know, saying virtual audience, making sure that we didn't let anything slip through, and that you absolutely had nailed down every single cough and whatever. That I think those things were the smaller challenges, but just getting it delivered and getting it delivered on time. Toucan took 3 weeks. I mean, that's that's absolutely incredible to do that so quickly. So just getting it delivered.
That is amazing. I mean, we were talking before the panel discussion, you know, that one of the benefits of this new way of working is that, you know, initiatives like this can be accelerated. You know, you don't have to go through all the red tape. Your teams can just get on with it. How, you know, once things go back to a little bit of normality, what will the expectations be on your team? You know, are we expected to keep innovating at the same pace once pandemic has kind of gone down?
I think when some of our normal business resumes, some of those people will be back making programs, so and be out in the field and on air, so that the opportunity might not be there, and the need might. They'll always want to innovate, this bunch of people, because that's what they'll do. They'll think of something and they'll go and do it. So I think these teams are, you know, absolutely brilliant. So I'm sure they will, and if we can support them to a great degree of success with particularly these 3 products, but there are more things we're working on. And so, you know, I just hope we can keep doing it. It's just whether the demand for quite so much will be there, but who knows?
Yeah, there's definitely opportunity. I mean, what's next for, I'll come to you and ask you the same question as well, Dan, but Morwen, what's next for you, you and your team? What's the next bird on the list?
Well, I mean, all sorts of things we're looking at, but you know what this proved to us is what I'm calling, for those old enough to recognise the advert, the Martini strategy: anytime, any place, anywhere. We need to be able to deliver things absolutely anywhere, whether you're in W1A, which is our main building, or you know, or Wigan or Warsaw or Wisconsin. It doesn't matter where you are. We need to be the same experience via a laptop like this. And so that's one of the main challenges, but also that remote production, that, you know, if you are presenting the Today programme from home, you need quite a big, expensive bit of kit, and so we've got a few of them. And my team were brilliant again the week before lockdown, got things out to everybody, seeing that this was coming. Since that time, they have worked with a Raspberry Pi, which is about £100, to get a kit together to make lots of people a very similar sort of broadcasting from anywhere, and that's the latest thing those 2 teams are working on together, actually, to deliver, and just to make it more accessible, more flexible, working, so you can do your job from anywhere, and that's one of our new innovations. Yeah,
brilliant. And Dan, the same question for you.
Yeah, well, with us, it's a case really of innovating in a fairly specific realm to do something. And so in the case of Magic of Disney's Animal Kingdom, we had a specific issue to address, and we innovated in order to address it. And there are sort of items on our innovation list which are specifically aimed at the requirements that we have. And one of the sort of big bugbears of mine is that we have loads of footage coming in, and the way people are finding that footage is through Rush's logs or emails or God knows what. And I'm pushing towards using systems that are able to log and catalog that footage as content, so that when somebody's searching for footage, they're searching for giraffe or rhino or something like that, rather than searching for, well, we know that we shot it on the 17th of October on a Monday at about 2:30, so I'll go back and check the logs about then. No, it's those sort of things that are going to hopefully make the processes easier and a better tool for telling stories effectively.
But it's really simplifying it, isn't it?
And that's picking up on Dan's point. That's what it's all about. It's for me, you know, whether it's your stories, Dan, or our news stories, it's about telling stories in the most direct, simplest way for our audiences. And that's what this innovation was all about. Just trying to deliver it better for our audiences.
Yeah, and some, you know, a lot of the best innovations do come out of just keeping it really simple. And I've got a question from the audience, so I might put you guys on the spot a little bit. So the question is, who else has innovated during the pandemic that you've really admired and thought, wow, that's amazing. Can you think of any examples of other programs or teams that you've spoken to?
I know, my colleagues at Sky News have done a lot of this remote working as well, and in a very similar vein to us, and have done some great stuff. And I think they may have won an award at the Broadcast Tech Awards as well. So I know they are pretty superb as well, and so I know they've done some. And ITN as well. So in the news sphere, a lot of my close colleagues and some of the agencies as well. Reuters, AP have done great things, but Sky have certainly have done a lot of good remote production.
And Dan, anyone come to mind?
Yeah, I'll just chip in with we've worked quite closely with a company called Salon, I'm sure people are aware of, who managed to develop a syncing product that sort of synced container data between a remote service center and an at-home edit, so that you weren't. What took an enormous amount of time initially was making sure that each edit had the appropriate data, and that when things came back to the office for work, that all that data was there. And Salon really solved that problem and saved us a hell of a lot of time.
Yeah, it's an exciting time for the industry. I think there's so much going on and so much has been accelerated. And that, I think, I hope you'll agree, and I'll ask you in a second, but that's really the long-term impact, isn't it, of the silver linings come out of a really rubbish year, basically. is that we are seeing lots of innovation and talent being able to expose their innovation and their talents. Just one final question for Morwen, actually for both of you. So what technology do you think is missing or not up to scratch just yet for your workflow that you think could really help? So maybe Dan, let's start with you. That one.
I'm gonna bang on about bandwidth again, because it's the key that just opens all the doors, and it depends where you are, obviously, and what your installation is. But I think what the lockdown has demonstrated is that people are becoming more aware of it, because people need more bandwidth in order to do Zoom calls and all that sort of stuff. Imagine what bandwidth you'd need if you needed to get 2 terabytes of footage from America to London. It's a big thing, and it's once you've got it, then it opens up so many other possibilities. And I just don't think that the availability of bandwidth at the moment is keeping up with the demand. But I think that will be resolved relatively quickly.
Fingers crossed. Morwen.
Yeah, I'd echo that, but I'd chuck in 5G as well. 5G for broadcasting in particular. A lot of work been done on it. It's there in cases. We've done some work with it. It's not there as a daily thing by any means. So keeping working on innovating 5G for broadcasting will be is the big one for all broadcasters, really.
What do you think the timeline is on that, on 5G? There's a lot of discussion around it, but realistically...
Yeah, I mean, at IBC last year, we did the virtual, well, it wasn't IBC, was it? But we did a 5G presentation using, and we'd done through the IBC Accelerator projects. And so we did a broadcast over 5G from Amsterdam, and we are continually working on things. Would it be within... We'll get a lot more. It'll be step by step. I'm not the expert putting a date on it, but advances are made all the time, but it's not there yet.
Brilliant. I'm going to wrap up the session, but before I do, could you sum up your lockdown experience in one word? Morwen.
Wow. Do you want bad hair day or challenging? Innovative and challenging. 2 words, sorry.
And Dan?
Tedious.
I'll have that word as well.
Oh dear. There's hope on the horizon, guys. Keep innovating. Congratulations again on your awards, very worthy winners. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great to hear, you know, quite often you don't hear why people have won an award or the story behind it. So it's been really, really interesting. And thank you so much for your time.
Thanks
very much. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.